Hi everybody, my name is Mannah, Global Artistic Director for Joico. Welcome to Joico Education on Demand, your online source of salon education 24/7. Today I'm going to be working on a brand new haircut called the Downtown Undercut. The reason why it's called Downtown Undercut is because of the inspiration of a lot of the downtown girls in major cities, including Manhattan, where I'm from. They're very creative, very experimental, slightly rebellious with the way they wear their clothes, their cut, and their colors. So this is going to be a major transformation. We had this beautiful model with extremely long hair, and she's been very willing to go a lot shorter and trusting us to do a complete change. So today's going to be a dramatic change. The overall look really is going to be shorter underneath, through the back and through the sides, but it's still going to have a very soft, feminine feel about the shape. It's going to be quite versatile as well, so you're going to be able to wear it in so many different ways, maybe a center parting, maybe a side parting, even maybe all off the face. So it's going to be one of those haircuts that your clients with shorter hair are going to be able to wear and love. So to begin this haircut, we're going to start with the K-Pack Color Therapy Luster Lock Spray. How to use this is you need to shake it very, very well, and it works as a nice cutting agent, but also as a blow drying agent because it protects the hair against the heat. So we're going to generously spray this through all the way, and this is going to be a great cutting agent for us to be able to work very clean sections and to maintain moisture as we execute this technique. Okay, so with this technique, we started with a center parting from the front hairline down to the nape. And then what we did is we worked two C-curved sections through the front and then isolating the fringe. The reason why we work two C-curved sections is that when we over direct this to the center, it will give us some irregularity rather than just working a straight line or a triangle. Then with the back and the sides, we took a C-curved section from the higher recession all the way back to behind the ear, and another C-curved section to the center, and repeated the exact same thing on the other side. The reason behind that is we wanted to work the C-curved section so it's parallel to the hairline and following the shape of the head. But with the back, the reason why we've worked with an M curved section through here is just so that when we disconnect the top section, it's not going to fall into a straight line. It's going to create these weight corners in the center and the sides to give us that slight irregularity through the back area. What we want to do is, constantly look at the model, because you want to be technical, but you also want to be visual, because you want the haircut to suit the individual. So even though I have a mapped out technique and I have something in mind, I'm going to constantly look at the length and sometimes go a little bit shorter depending on suitability. So the first section we want to take is we're going to subdivide from the top of the ear. So we're subdividing the back from the front through the sides, and we're going to begin working horizontal sections in this area. Okay, so you want to just make sure that you comb the hair away nice and clean. You don't need too many clips. You want to keep it as simple as possible and as salon friendly as possible. Okay, so we're going to work with a section parallel to the C-curved section, about 1/2 inch, okay? And this is going to be the guideline for the sides. So we're just going to elevate that square, pull it straight up and out of the head, and we're going to begin to cut this square. So elevation, using the fine end of the comb, and we cut that square. Now we might go a little bit shorter, but before I go a little bit short, I just want to make sure that I'm happy with the guideline in terms of the cut that we've just put in there. Can you point cut? Absolutely. I'm going to club cut because I want more discipline within the shape and see the guideline a lot clearer. So you can see that I've created a guideline through here. The next section, which is going to be 1/2 inch lower, we're going to take another horizontal section, elevate everything straight out of this section. So we're not elevating up, we're pulling it straight out, so it's straight out of the second section in terms of the way we're pulling it out. My guideline's on top, not underneath, and we repeat the same thing, follow the same guideline. Last section, if you want a lot more softness in front of the ear, you can over direct that higher. So I'm going to over direct it slightly because we can always cut hair off but can't put it on. So it's always good to see the length and giving myself an option whether I want to go shorter or not. Okay, so that's the first guide. Once I comb that through, you can see the hair that we have in front of the ear, which is what creates that softness. What you don't want to do is to leave this guideline too long, because when that's dry, that's going to expand and create weight. So I'm just gonna go back in and go a little bit shorter just through this area so it's a lot more narrower and complements her overall face shape. So you can do this in one section. Just make sure you pick up all of the hair and elevate it to the initial stationary guide. And we're gonna just go that little bit shorter. And then just check the second section and make sure it's square and clean. And the last section, I'm not gonna elevate as much. I do want softness. I feel like it's a little bit too long. That for me already sits a lot better. And then later we can take excess weight through in there. So the next thing we're gonna do through this front area is pull the hair forward. It's this section that we've just cut, okay? And just shape it a little bit more around the front here. So it's got that softness, and open up the area through here, and we've still got the softness in front of the ear. And when you look at it straight on, what you don't want to do is keep this section too long, because when you dry it, it will look too round. We want it to be quite narrow and to complement the face shape that she has. Okay, repeating the exact same technique on the other side, elevating everything up and out, and then working parallel to the head, cutting that square. It's better to always leave the second side a little bit longer so you can check for balance with the other side. What you don't want to do is cut this side shorter than have to cut the other side shorter. So I'm going to check for balance, and it is a little bit longer on the second side. So I'm just going to go back in and just cut that slightly shorter, like a millimeter. Check for balance one more time, and then continue with the rest of the cut. I'm happy with that. So now we're going to take sections again from here, horizontally, elevate everything square and out from the head. Make sure we can see our guideline. Next section, pulling it straight up, straight out. Make sure you can see your guide and work that so it's the same as the other side. Again, I want to check for balance. The best way to check for balance is to stand square with the model rather than on the side, because you won't feel the balance. You've got to stand square to the model and check for balance. And if you feel intimidated, just ask them to close their eyes. Close your eyes for me. Thank you. Cool. And we're just going to pull that forward and just shape that front area slightly and knock any excess hair. So we've got that softness on this side as well. For the next section, we've taken a diagonal forward section from that C-curved to the ear. So we're working with the neck section on the sides, and I've just clipped this away just to make it easy, so as the hair dries, it's not gonna be interrupted with the back section. Good tip, put your finger where the parting is and then draw the comb to your finger so you have a nice clean section, and you're using the guide from the front. You can see the guide just there. And we just cut that off. Being confident with the guideline that we've just created. Cool. Next section, exact same thing. Pulling it out at 90 from its base. Using the front and the previous as a guideline. So you can see the front and the previous. Okay, last section, we're going to elevate that at 90 degrees, straight out of the head, again following the two guidelines. So, best way to judge is just to start combing it down and start to see the shape over the ear and this beautiful graduation at the crest of the head. Same thing as we did on the other side, everything out on 90, check for balance and follow the same guideline. Constantly check for balance as you progress through the whole haircut and make sure it's the same on both sides, because this is what's going to be the guideline for the next section. It's just a little bit longer, and that's to do with my elevation behind the ear. So we're just going to go back and take that little piece off. Okay, so next section, we're going to take a section here, diagonal back section, leaving all that hair away, and then we're going to take a small section, leaving this area out behind the ear, and you'll see why in a minute. So So you can see the guideline here. This area you can elevate, you can graduate, however you like, all dependent on the look that you want. I do want a bit of length behind the ear and through the back for now. So we're gonna keep the elevation T to the parting, which means coming straight out from the parting. So the elevation is worked T to the parting, and then we're gonna keep a little bit more length through the back to give us some optional length to detail later. This section behind the ear is going to be directed internally, and that will give us a bit more length behind the ear as well. So that's over directed to this stationary guideline, and you continue working to the same elevation and distribution. So when I comb that now, I've got that little bit more length just behind the ear, which gives us, again, a little bit more softness for the shape. You're gonna do the exact same thing on the other side. Important tip is to keep your fingers parallel to the section. Don't twist, because then you start affecting the distribution. And as you begin to comb this through, you'll have a lot more softness through the back. I'm gonna just check for balance. I feel like it's a little bit longer on this side, which is a good thing. I always leave it a little longer on the second side so I can go a little bit shorter and make sure it's perfect. So just gonna go back in and just take a little bit of length off. Okay. So now what we're going to do is work diagonal sections and continue following the same guidelines. So I'm going to go back to the original side that I began on, using the same stationary guide, and then work that same elevation, which is diagonal back section, and then the elevation is T to the parting, and so is the distribution. And work that through. Be confident with the guideline. Okay, so next section, diagonal back. Make sure you keep your sections very small. It shouldn't be really wider than half of the comb. So the whole section with the guideline should be as wide as the comb. And then we take some from the guide, work everything up and out. Elevation and distribution is T to this parting. So it's like comes straight up. So it's not coming down, it's not going out, it's coming literally like a T to this parting here. And you follow with the same guideline, which is a traveling guideline. So I'm not over directing, I'm using the guideline and traveling with it. As you comb it, you start to see the shape take place, and you can start to see how now it begins to follow the shape of the head. And later we can take a little bit of this length off, but for now, it's about just leaving it, following the guideline, and then detailing a little bit later. What you want to avoid is over-directing in this case. Once you start over-directing and dropping your elevation, it's going to start building too much weight. What we want to do is reduce weight in this case, because this is the undercut. We still got length that's going to sit on top. And you're taking your diagonal sections until you reach the other side. So now we're going to continue working diagonal sections this way. As you pick up this section, you're going to have two guidelines, the previous from the front and the previous from the back. And they should really match. So that's the back and that's the front. So you should just follow that same guideline on both sides. So it's going to be nice and even through the back. Okay, so just combing that flat. Before we move on, what I would like to do is just check for balance behind the ear, internally by feeling it with 2 fingers. Okay, it's a little bit longer, touch longer, just in here. So I'm going to come back in, and that could be to do with my elevation. Okay, and you can see it, it's a finger mark. That's why it's important to constantly check your work and make sure it's perfect, because it'll save you time later trying to fix it. And I think the better the technique and the more disciplined, the longer it will last. And it looks more expensive as well. Okay, so that's the undercut completed from a technical point of view. What I want to do now is reduce the weight. So before the hair collapses on top, while it's still sectioned off, I'm going to begin to dry all of this hair here and then begin to reduce the weight, because this is what's going to allow the hair to sit a lot narrower through the back and the sides. Okay, so as you can see, we've dried off the hair completely around the sides and the back. And we've got a really nice graduation all the way around. Now, the reason again why we've dried it is because we want to reduce the weight. A little tip is not to use the brush. We just use the comb and blast dry that through with the comb, so we're using her natural volume. We're not adding any volume, or we're not over straightening it either. I actually want to see how it will sit naturally. So by using the wide end of the comb and just combing that through, what it's done, it's swelled the hair, as you can see. So what I want to do is start to reduce that weight through in here, so it's a lot more narrower, and I'm setting myself up for the overcut that's going to sit on top. So to do that, we're going to work weight reduction mostly through this area here. I love what's going on here. It's very, very soft, it's very fragmented, and I think it's what keeps it that, gives it that more feminine finish to it. But where the weight is through in here. So I'm being very intentional with my approach. I'm closing my scissors, I'm picking it up where I don't like the weight, let that sit comfortably in the comb. Get your scissors. What you don't want to do is come in too much on an angle, because then you actually start cutting too much hair off. I don't want to change the shape, I just want to reduce the weight. So working through, point cutting, elevation a little bit higher, same thing. Very gentle. We love the shape that's in there, we just want to reduce a bit of that weight. You can already see the difference. So by reducing it just that little bit of weight, you could see how rounder it is through in there, and then how narrower it is on this side, and it just kind of elongates her face to make it look a lot more narrower rather than a lot wider. And that's just simply done by a little bit of point cutting. So I'm going to continue working with that point cutting and doing the exact same thing on the other side. The best way to judge a haircut and the best way to judge the weight is not to do that, is actually to comb it flat and clean, so you can see exactly where it's heavy and where it needs to be flatter, or where you need to reduce the weight. This is personalizing, so it's personal. How you reduce weight is totally up to you, but you don't want to use the thinning shears too much, because then you could reduce too much weight and then start altering the shape. I just want to reduce that excess weight and then begin to detail the perimeter. So with the back, same kind of thing. You could see the weight has been built up literally around the crest of the head. And that's our focus for now, to reduce weight. And taking my time and doing it right is just going to make this haircut so much more bespoke to our model, and it'll be a lot easier to maintain as well. Personalizing is visual, it's what you see, and then doing what's necessary to make the haircut work. And most importantly, to make it as easy to maintain for the client at home. It's lovely. Okay, with the perimeter, I just want to cut a little bit off now. We can always cut a little bit more later. I just want to detail all these little fine bits by point cutting flat on the skin. Be super careful with the little freckles on the neck. So we're just going to comb the hair and leave a lot of this softness there, but just kind of take that excess length and weight away. Just make sure you point cut any of that excess hair so it sits flat and it's still got that softness through there. Same in front of the ear. And what you want to make sure is that the balance is there, not just with length, but also with weight distribution. So it has a really nice, soft, feminine feel. It's not thicker in one area more than the other. Okay, same on the other side. Just going to point cut into this area and then do a little bit of channel cutting just so it takes that excess weight away. And make sure you're completely happy with the balance on both sides before progressing on to the overcut. A little bit longer through in here, and it's just a matter of detailing, just making sure that both sides are exactly the same and not rushing this section, because everyone wants a balanced haircut. Okay, let's do it. fringe area. Okay, so with the front fringe section, what we're going to do is start with a profile section, and the idea is to leave it a little bit longer, and then we're going to work it so it works with her face shape. Keeping in mind, there's a lot more length to sit on top. So we're going to start with a profile guide. So working the hair in the center, and then elevate this and cut this round. Now this will be determined with the length that you want to create. I'm going to leave it a little bit longer at first, just to have a look. Sometimes when it's kind of long and it folds over your finger, it's probably easier just to cut it first and then redistribute the hair. So it's a lot easier, it's not wrapping around your fingers. So we're just cutting that round to the head. And the reason why we're layering it in is so when it falls, it's a lot softer and not so heavy throughout the perimeter. Let's leave it at that length for now. What we're going to do now is work sections parallel to the initial stationary guideline, and then begin to direct everything to the center. So we're working it from shorter to slightly longer. Making sure we can see our guide. Cute, cute. So again, directing everything over to the center and following through with that same guideline. Again, see how it wraps? If it's too difficult, just cut that off. So now it sticks out. So much easier to control the hair when it's like this. And then you're working blunt cutting and cutting that round, following the same guideline and making sure your fingers are parallel to the center parting. Okay, next section, same thing, using the stationary guide, directing everything to the center, which is what we call an inversion. And you're creating the same layering pattern and following through with that same guideline. And this is going to give us a beautiful, softer length through the fringe. So you can see the disconnection. We're not using any guideline, we're creating a brand new guideline because we're beginning to cut the overcut. Okay, once you've done that, you want to check for balance by cross-checking and making sure you're happy with the balance on both sides. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for it to be longer, shorter, and then longer. I'm going to over-direct that forward, just to make sure I'm happy with the balance from here. Can you guys see how it's shorter, longer, shorter, longer? That's because of the inversion. Okay, so I want to check for balance also from the front. I think checking for balance is something you should be doing all the time. No matter how experienced I am as a hairdresser, I think it's important to check for balance. Number one, to keep you on track with the haircut. Number two, clients love it. They love when you check their hair because it makes them feel like your heart's in it and you're really giving them your very best, and they're going to walk out with a balanced haircut. I feel like it's a touch longer, literally, just through in here. So I'm going to go back in and just over-direct, but slightly less. Maybe I over-directed a little bit too much on this side in comparison to the other side, and just work with that same guideline. Yeah, that's much better. Now also with the perimeter, I'm just going to point cut. Just point cut any excess hair just to give us that softness and also that strength throughout the perimeter, so it looks nice and healthy. So even though we've layered it through and it's soft, you still want the ends to look super healthy. That's really one of our key messages behind any cuts or colors that we do, is just to maintain that healthy looking hair and to make the hair look as healthy and shiny as possible. That's perfect. Next section we're going to do, which is our last section on the top, we're going to subdivide this by taking a radial section from the top of the head to the top of the ear. So we're focusing on the front first and then the back. So by doing that, we take the clips out. Okay, so for this top section, as you can see, we've taken a radial section and focusing on the front first. And what we're going to do is work center profile guideline. So pulling everything forward. and use the same guideline from the front and work that round. Okay, and that's going to be my guide for the top. And again, with this part of the haircut, I'm going to work sections and start to over direct to the previous guideline. Take another diagonal section and direct over to the center. Follow that same stationary guideline. Last section, you're grabbing the whole half and utilizing that center section. Make sure that your distribution is very clean and direct everything to the center. And whatever reaches, you cut. And by doing that, it's going to give us more length to personalize and to drop over the undercut. Now, just looking at the density of the hair, I think it's actually quite nice where it is now, because once we start cutting that across over through here, it'll sit quite nicely, but it's given us enough weight and length to cut. If the length was up to here and I had to cut it up to there, you need enough length to be able to cut, and it still has enough weight for you to be able to personalize later. So in this case, we've over directed everything to the center. However, if the hair's a lot thicker, you can direct over to the previous section. It all depends on the density of the hair. So we're gonna just go back to the center, make sure we got that center parting. I've shifted it over slightly so we got a little bit more of a guideline. We're gonna repeat the exact same thing on the other side. So doing the exact same thing by cutting a bit of the length off, another diagonal forward section, and repeat the exact same thing with the over direction. Just make sure that the tension is the same on both sides. If your hands are too small, subdivide the section and focus on the back first. Okay, so at this stage I want to start to just make sure I'm happy with the balance on both sides. So we're going to cross check and then begin to detail. Cross check means you check it the opposite way of we cut it. So we cut it vertically, we're going to check it horizontally. Cool, that looks quite balanced on both sides. So right now, I want to start putting the length in by elevating the hair nice and high. Begin point cutting. And your fingers parallel to the center parting. That elevation gives us softness. So where I've cut it, I'm quite happy with, because we're going to still channel cut once it's dry. But the idea, behind this haircut is to make sure it's quite narrow. So as it dries, it will slightly puff out, because that's the kind of hair that she has. It swells when it's dry. So we're going to just do a little bit more channel cutting later. But for now, I think we want to stay with this length, so we have some length to play with afterwards. Same here. Just going to make sure high elevation. Just going to put a rough guide and then check for balance with the other side. Okay, it's longer, I know. Just want to make sure I know roughly how much longer it is. About an inch longer. So we come back through this side, keep the hair elevated, and then point cut. So the front is the same. As we move towards the back, it starts getting a little bit longer. Now we work with the back section. We're going to use the same guideline from the crown. So we're going to just comb that a little bit further back. Okay, so with this area, we're going to use the crown as a guide and continue working round. So it follows the shape of the head. And that guideline's taken until all of the hair reaches the same guideline. Using the crown as a guide. You can see where it's sitting. It's quite low. So I'm just going to go back in and go a little bit shorter, just so it sits close to the point of where I would like it to sit. So if you pick up a little bit of the longer hair, that's totally fine. Slightly round it a bit more and follow the same guideline. Cool. So now, rather than doing an inversion, what we're going to do is work pivoting radial sections. So it's going to put a bit of moisture in the hair, just so we have more control. And you're going to start to see how it sits beautifully through the back. Okay, what does pivoting radial mean? It's when you're pivoting behind radial. Okay, because we put a radial section in to subdivide the front from the back, and we're going to now start to pivot all the way around using the center crown as a guideline. So the center crown in the previous section will travel all the way through. So we've put the center section in here. We're going to take a center parting, subdivide that, okay, and then work from the center, following through with the same guideline that we've just utilized to put the section. So we're just using the same guideline and pivoting all the way around and making sure we're rounding it off so it follows the shape of the head. So you're being technical and visual, making sure that the length that you're working is exactly where you want it to sit, but you're giving yourself a little bit more length than needed because you're going to be also detailing a little bit more later. So if it's a little bit longer where you want it to be, that's totally fine. Because once you start detailing and personalizing the hair, you can get it exactly to where you want it after it's completely dry. And the reason why we dry the hair and personalize it is you can't personalize wet hair. You've got to wait till it dries to first see exactly how the hair is responding and then detail it accordingly. No one walks around with wet hair, so you've got to see how it's dry, see how it swells, and then begin to detail it through point cutting, channel cutting, back cutting, whatever techniques you feel that's personal to you to achieve that result that you want to achieve. So constantly traveling from the crown, pivoting all the way around. The reason why we're not inverting it is because it'll keep too much length through behind the ear. In this case, we just wanted to work pivoting radials. So as you get to the last section, slightly over direct back and follow that same guide. Just for cross-checking, we're just going to direct this back to that stationary, make sure there's no excess hair hanging over. Little 4 hairs there. Cool. Very happy with the way that's coming together. Again, this is longer than I need, but at least I have a bit of hair to work with a little bit later. So same thing on the other side, working, pivoting radial sections and using that stationary guideline and traveling around. And whether you're doing a trim or a major haircut, it's the same thing, it's the same guideline. You just got to follow through with the guideline. So be just as confident with a trim as you are with a big change, because you're following a technique and a guideline that's going to give you the same result. Last section, over directing back slightly. And then just over direct a little bit of that hair and just make sure there's no excess hair coming over the guideline. Just a little bit there. Now what we're going to do is just cross-check again through the back. Just moving that hair forward. And just making sure you're happy with that point through there and just knock it off just for that excess balance. That's perfect. Great. Okay, so what I want to do now is to dry the shape. The haircut's by no means finished. We've got to still detail and take a little bit of length off in certain areas, but we can start to see the shape that's being created on our model. I can see it's going to be a little bit round, so we're going to still detail that. It's going to look super cute when it's dry. Okay, so I don't want to, continue cutting. What I do want to do is begin blow drying this top area and just begin to detail the hair. Okay, so we've just completely dried the hair just by quickly blow drying it. You can see how round her hair is because she's got that kind of hair that swells. So my goal now is to reduce that weight and to make that a lot more narrower, okay? So we're gonna start off with the sides. You can't tell it's an undercut until you move it, and then there's your undercut. The great thing behind the undercut, as much as it's a cool idea to create a cool haircut, it's actually solving problems with hair like this, because it's thick hair. So by cutting that underneath shorter and then allowing the top to sit, you can then now channel cut that and reduce a lot of the weight. It'll be a lot easier. Could you imagine if this was as long as this? The hair would be literally twice as thick. Okay, so I want to isolate the fringe away. Okay, we're going to just go through and work in front of the ear and work channel cutting or surface cutting, whichever you prefer to call it. And this takes that excess weight away and it allows you to see the undercut a little bit more. Okay, keep combing and keep doing it until you're completely happy. So again, I'll go back in, use my scissors, and I'm gliding on a slight angle. You can be quite a little bit more aggressive with it because it's what's going to create that softness for the shape. Already now, we can start to see how soft that's beginning to sit around the edge. It's not as bowly anymore. So we're going to continue doing the same thing on the other side. Isolating the fringe, just focusing on in front of the ear. And as you pull that back, you start to get a lot more of a fragmented finish through the sides. I'm going to just go in a little bit more this way. I quite like the way it is for the bottom, just more through the top here. Comb that flat. And already now you can start to see how much softer that is on both sides. Okay, I'm going to continue doing the same thing around the back. Just combing that flat. Okay, so I first want to just point cut the length. So we've got some kind of guide. Okay, and where it's heavy, we're going to come in and surface cut this whole area. It's the best way to reduce weight and to maintain flatness, especially behind the ear. If she tucks it behind the ear, you want it to be as flat as possible. Combing that flat gives me that texture that I'm wanting to achieve and the flatness that I want to achieve as well. She's got a lot of hair, so you've got to spend time detailing it. So it's going to be so easy to maintain. And the technique that we've put in there is perfect. You can't even really tell it's an undercut there. See how it follows the shape of the head quite nicely? Only till I lift it can you tell it's an undercut. And that's the whole purpose of this cut. Once you put a little bit of product, you can start to show off the undercut a little bit more. But it also solves a problem for people that want to go shorter and that have thick hair. So you can see how much flatter that is already on this side and how bowly and heavy it is there. So we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Then we can take this length a little bit shorter later, but I just want to first get the weight removed, especially through the back and behind the ear. You can see when I move that, how much heavier it is on this side. Okay, first we work the perimeter by point cutting. Okay, now what we're going to do to reduce the weight is exactly the same thing on the other side. So we're putting our scissors right in and slightly closing our blades. You don't want to shut your blades because then you're going to put a chunk into the hair. You just want to comb it flat and glide the scissors in the same direction of the hair. Don't come too much on an angle because you'll be cutting too much off. And you're focusing on where it's heavy. It's called surface cutting. Some people call it channel cutting. And it's the best way to reduce weight but maintain flatness. And then you can push the hair behind the ear, which is probably what she's going to do some of the time. And just go in and reduce weight where it's too heavy. And that will be nice no matter whether she wears it forward or whether she wears it behind the ear. The length around the perimeter, I think I still want to take it up a little bit, but my focus now is really just going through internally to reduce that weight. Especially, I've got to say this, I think this is very important to know also, especially when you're doing a massive change from down here to a lot shorter. The hair is a lot thicker because the previous haircut hasn't been point cut or sliced. And that's why you've got to spend that little bit more time reducing weight so it sits nicely from the beginning. So keep that in mind when you're doing a big change. You know, you probably find yourself spending a little bit more time reducing weight just so it looks more lived in, because the hair hasn't been cut previously internally because the length was all the way through here. And especially with thicker hair, you've just got to treat each individual differently and do whatever necessary to make this haircut suit and also easy to maintain. One thing I would say to avoid is too much thinning shears. Again, you might take too much off, and what it does, it makes the ends look too wispy at times. So in this case, I think to use the blades are a lot better to give you this result. Now that I can see the overcut where it's sitting, I can then detail this accordingly. Still want enough length behind the ear, but just through the center where it gets a little bit too fragmented, we can just point cut that through. And still keep that soft feminine feel behind the ear. And what I normally do to get the balance is I get the model or the client to look down, to look up, to look right, to look left, and to look straight. Now that's how it's going to sit. Okay, so you then go in visually and then you cut that. What you don't want to do is perfectly cut that square, and then when they move, because of the natural movement of the nape, it's all over the place. So have a little movement, allow the hair to breathe, and then work it through so it's going to sit nicely every single time when she's moving around. Okay, now I want to work through the fringe. So the front is a bit thick as well, as you can see, quite thick, but we're getting there with the shape, you know. So with the front, I want to just pick it up and layer this through so I have a little bit more control. Again, by point cutting, I don't want to slice, I don't want to get too aggressive with the personalizing. I just want it to sit softer because her hair swells a lot. And obviously she's having a color now, so it's going to swell the hair even more. So it's good to set myself up and Sherry for the color. And you can start to see a massive difference, you know, with the way now the hair is sitting. When it was firstly cut and dried, so thick and quite bowly. But as you begin to detail the shape, you start to work internally to make it look so much better. So it's not about going shorter, because you put the technique in there. The technique's great. It's about just reducing the weight so it starts looking younger and cooler, as the name is, Downtown Undercut. You want it to look like a cool downtown girl. So by reducing that weight, it takes that kind of curvature shape away, makes it look younger. So I've done that around the front, I'm doing it all the way around because it's the layers that really are swelling up into the hair. And it's knowing when to stop as well. You know, you don't want to over texturize. It's doing what's necessary for the shape to look good and to sit nicely for you. And for those that, you know, have clients that want something different, I highly recommend color. You know, color really sets off and complements the haircut. The haircut complements the color. And it really kind of gives you a multi-dimension to the shape, to the texture, and to the hair. Once you've got some really nice color in there. Okay, so the last section, we're just gonna cross-check the top like we did with the length and just point cut any excess hair just to make sure that the weight distribution is the same all the way through. Okay, quite like the way that's sitting. I think she's gonna be, that's the haircut completed. You know, you can wear it in the center. You can see how it's a lot more narrower. So that's the technique from the cutting finished and completed, but no look is complete without a color. So at this stage, we're gonna get the color done by Sherry and then come back for the finished result. So here is the finished result of the Downtown Undercut. This is a look you can wear in so many different ways. So that's all to do with the way you style it and which products you use. What I used was the Dream Blowout by Joico. And what this product does, it reduces static and frizz and saves you up to 50% in time when it comes to blast drying and drying the hair. And then we've used the Beach Shake by Joico to fine detail the look and create this texture that we have. So as you can see, it's a shorter undercut, but still kept very feminine. And because of the elevation through the back, we've got a little bit more length, so you can see that from the front, and it gives you a really kind of cute finish when you have that little bit more length through the back. It makes it a lot more modern, younger, and creative. And the way the overcut is sitting, it just kind of follows the shape of the head. And with the color that Sherry's done, works really well to complement the haircut. And then around the front, this is quite nice. You can always put it behind the ear. The undercut has a lot more softness through in there, so that keeps it really feminine. So it's a fun haircut to run your fingers through it. Hopefully you guys can recreate it in the salon on your clients. Thanks for watching Joico Education on Demand.